we do want to hear from you. And so what we'll do tonight is give just a little bit of a background and introduction and overview of the changes that have been made, and then we're happy to take comments. So don't worry, there will be plenty of time for that. So without any more ado, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Hilton to go ahead and walk us through this.
Great. Hello. Good evening. I'm going to start my screen share here. Okay. Seeing my screen?
Yep.
Okay, excellent. So Director Ford already went through the introductions. I guess I always do like to start with a couple of the group agreements at the beginning of the meeting. First is that everyone in the community has a seat at the table, and we want to hear from everyone. Second is, if you feel comfortable, once we get to the public comment, public question section of it, providing your name and your role in the community is helpful to us. And of course, that it just as a ground rule, we do expect communication to be polite and respectful. Thank you in advance for that. So tonight is continuing a conversation that I'm sure many of the people that are on this Zoom call have been participating in. We started with our June 28th Zoom meeting, as the director mentioned. Following that feedback, we went back and we reformulated it. And then we brought it back to the community, and we held a meeting in Garberville, a meeting in Eureka, and a meeting in McKinleyville. And then based on the comments that we gleaned from those meetings, we again went back, reformulated it, and published the newest version on the website. A note that I do want to make, and an apology, is that the inland version is on the website. The coastal version has not yet been uploaded. As is noted on the website, the coastal version it's going to be substantially similar. There are very few differences. The most substantial is just which community plan areas are named in the area subject to the cap, and I'll highlight that when we get to it, looking at the draft. But I'm going to summarize, of course, the changes that we made in response to the meetings that we've held. I do want to highlight, again, looking forward, we're anticipating being able to get a draft to the Planning Commission for a workshop on September 21st. This is a workshop, not a hearing, so it really is for an opportunity for the planning commissioners to read it line by line, ask us questions, hear from the community. The public is welcome to attend in person or by calling in or Zoom. All of those avenues are available. And so that's on the 21st. And then hopefully we'll be able to get it going forward towards hearing and decision, within the next month or two. Okay. And I always like to frame the discussion of the ordinance in terms of values, because it really is at the heart of what we're trying to do. We're trying to find the correct balance between these different community values, and the ones that are most highlighted for us, that we've heard the most about, are housing stock, neighborhood quality, and of course, economic gains for residents. The updated draft that we're going to be looking at, the biggest differences that you're going to see are that we made a greater differentiation between hosted and unhosted stays. So hosted in this case is when it's a portion of a house that you live in. Unhosted is when it's an entire residential unit. We created greater differentiation between the urban areas and the rural areas, and that has to do with the potential impacts on the community. And then we had really, I think, have with each successive draft been further simplifying the permit process that that will get you to a permit. And so with that, I will pull up the ordinance. Are you seeing it? Okay, great. So the purpose is those values that I had up on the screen. The applicability, so they apply to rental of dwelling units as short-term rentals. Short-term rentals is defined as rental of a unit or a portion of a unit for a period of fewer than 30 days. Allowed zones may be permitted in zoning districts where residential use is a permitted use. We did a little bit of a changing of the order within the ordinance, and hopefully that'll be not too confusing, but highlighting what are the application materials in addition to the standard application materials that are required for everything. Grant deed, an affidavit, if applicable, that you've given the good neighbor guide, which will be described later, to the neighbors in the closest 10 dwellings and within 300 feet up and down the street. Evidence of property owner consent if the permit holder is someone other than the property owner. Suspension and revocation, this is the same language as it was before. It's just saying that they may be suspended or go through the revocation process as identified, which means it has to go to the Board of Supervisors to be revoked. Permit requirements, administrative permit. This is really the bucket that we want most of the applications to fall into. And then special permit, if there is some aspect of the project that we think calls for some level of discretion. The required findings for a special permit are that it won't have a significant adverse impact on the health, safety, and welfare, and that it won't have an significant adverse impact on the quality of the neighborhood. So these are the two things that when a decision maker is theoretically looking at one of these things, that's what we want to make sure of. Okay. And now hosted short-term rental is in its own section. So this is referring to, I think we've got the definition down at the bottom. So I'll go back up shortly. Man, the scroll is pretty slow. That a hosted short-term rental of a portion of a dwelling unit where the caretaker remains in residence. And caretaker is person or persons that live in the subject dwelling, attends to day-to-day operations, and who is the point of contact for neighborhood concerns. So in this case, again, the caretaker lives in the house, and a portion of the house, a bedroom, several bedrooms are rented. And this includes a traditional a traditional B&B, a traditional bed and breakfast would fall into this category of hosted short-term rental. Okay. So the standards for health and safety, building and fire, so shall be permitted or legal non-conforming. And what legal non-conforming means is that there was a date in which the building code was established within Humboldt County, and perhaps, Director, you remember the exact date. I think it was in the 50s. And that prior to that date,
not that old, Keenan.
Nice one. That if it was built prior to that date when the building code was adopted, then it was built legally. So it may not be built to code, but there was no code to build it to. So that it doesn't conform to the code, but it is legal because it was built according to the rules at the time. So those are the two categories. It can either be permitted or it can be legal non-conforming. And then you need to have fire extinguishers, smoke detectors, carbon monoxide, etc., for safety of guests. Make sure that waste, recycling, compost is disposed of appropriately. Access road is category 4, and the maximum overnight occupancy is 2 per bedroom plus 1. So I'll highlight that standards C and D, exception to standard C and D, may be sought with a special permit. So that means that if you are on a road that does not meet the category 4 standard, you may still apply for a permit. It's just going to be a special permit rather than an administrative one, which means that notice is sent to the neighbors, and that there's the opportunity, if it's needed, for there to be a public review of the question of access or the question of occupancy. And then the second set of standards is neighborhood quality public nuisance. First is resident caretaker. So the caretaker shall reside within the dwelling unit and be present when rooms are occupied by guests. Noise, and this is essentially there are quiet hours. Parking, 1 off-street parking spot per rented bedroom, and then if there is legal on-street parking, you may use 1 on-street parking to go towards your minimum. Exceptions to standard C, so the parking, may be sought with a special permit. If you have, for some reason, a difference in your parking situation, you can put that forward for public review. And then this is the second category. So those were the rules for hosted. And so if you're going to live in the unit, these are the rules that you're looking to. So it's a much shortened version than what we've had before. And now turning to the unhosted. So this is rental of entire units. And this is, I've discussed these limitations. I'm sure many of the attendees have heard about these, but if there is a covenant and agreement between the county and the property owner that, for instance, a dwelling has to be affordable housing, then it cannot be used as a short-term rental. SB 9, this is a state law that allows for subdivisions, urban lot splits, and allows for development of duplexes. If you develop in accordance with the state laws, there are limitations in state law that they cannot be used as short-term rentals. The goal of this legislation at the state level was to increase housing. Accessory dwelling units. We recently adopted our county accessory dwelling unit ordinance. It came into effect January 1st, 2020. One of the provisions of that ordinance is that ADUs are not to be used as short-term rentals. So if your ADU is built according to those rules post-2020, then that is a limitation on the use of the accessory dwelling unit. And then alternative owner builder. So definitely want to highlight the fact that when discussing with the chief building official, came up with this pathway, which is that AOB dwellings, and this is another one where the ordinance that we're working with, the code as written for AOB, it says it shall be used by the owner. That's something in code that is outside of this ordinance. We're making it consistent with the AOB ordinance. But we came up with the solution that AOB dwellings may be permitted after the fact pursuant to the building code in effect at the time of permit issuance. So if it was an AOB that was built in 2004, the building permit that you would seek for that AOB would be the 2004 rules. So if it didn't require, say, sprinklers, then you wouldn't be required to have sprinklers. If it was a, and I think that 2004 would fit into that bucket. I'm not extremely well versed in the building code, and then the unhosted short-term rental permit limitations. So the rental cap only applies to these unhosted short-term rentals, and it's not more than 2% of housing stock. And it's within this area that is, and I'll be able to pull up a map that shows this clearly now that I'm at my workstation, but it's essentially between Rio Del and Trinidad and kind of wraps around Carlotta and Blue Lake. It's the greater Humboldt Bay area. And This and the logic behind that is that this is the area that is experiencing the housing crunch within our county most acutely. The area that is within, I guess, kind of a reasonable commute distance to the major economic hubs. Non-transferable short-term rentals shall not be transferred between property owners. So that's if there is a change in who is the caretaker, for instance, that's not touched by this. It's just if the property is sold, the new owner does not inherit the permit. The per person limit, an individual or business shall not own more than 5 parcels with short-term rental permits. So again, it's looking at the number of properties that have the use on it rather than the number of short-term rental units themselves. And then resource zone districts. So if you're in agriculture exclusive, agriculture general, forest recreation, timberland production zone, it may only be permitted as a farm stay. And the definition of a farm stay, is a form of short-term rental which includes the option and focus for guests to participate in educational, recreational, or social activities on the property that features agricultural use. And then turning to the standards. So some of these are going to be familiar because we already went over them, and I'll just touch on them very briefly. So for the health and safety, building and fire, that's the same. Solid waste, recycling, compost, the same. Access has to be category 4, but then also added in road maintenance association provision that if a private access road has an established road maintenance association, the permit holder shall be a member. And that's just to make sure that the increased use of the road that comes from guests, that there's a responsibility taken for that. And same maximum overnight occupancy standard. And then turning to the neighborhood quality public nuisance. So, and this is a place where there were some changes. So these provisions apply to parcels. They only apply to some. They apply to parcels that are within community plan areas. So that's generally with, like, if you're close to one of the established communities. Parcels that are 10 acres or fewer in size. So even if you're not in a community plan area, if you are on a under 10 acre parcel. So for instance, I think of like the neighborhood in Petrolia. There's no community plan area, but there is a section of town that has smaller parcels. So that these provisions would be triggered in that case. And then parcels where unhosted short-term rental is located within 1,000 feet of the nearest neighboring residence. So even if you're out on a large parcel, not close to anything, not in a community plan, if you are close to your neighbors, then we're still looking at the neighborhood quality. First section is the Good Neighbor Guide. So this is distributing to your neighbors the telephone number and name of the caretaker. This is the first point of contact if there are any issues with the short-term rental, the location of the approved parking, and then the permit standards, basically, so that everyone's on the same page about what the expectations are when a permit's been issued. Next, lighting. No direct light shall spill onto the neighbors. Per parcel, 1 short-term rental may be permitted per legal parcel. Neighborhood concentration. This is another area where we did some tuning. So each short-term rental may not exceed the following neighborhood concentration, except within Shelter Cove. And parcels with a general plan density of 1 or fewer acres per dwelling unit. So that means that if the parcel is that there's an expectation that on a parcel that's 1 acre, you would have 1 dwelling unit. Yeah, that short-term rentals shall not exceed 10% of the dwellings on the access road, and as the crow flies, the nearest 10 dwellings shall not be short-term rentals. So read this as if it's been planned that this is going to be an area that where generally the parcels are going to be less than 1 acre, we're going to have these controls on, or these limitations, better put, on how many short-term rentals can be there. The second scenario, parcels with a general plan density of more than 1 acre per dwelling unit, is that they shall not exceed 20% of the dwellings on the access road. So, but it gets rid of that, as the crow flies provision, recognizing that there's a difference between when you're on a more densely populated area, more concentrated area versus not. And okay. And then private gatherings and parties have no more than 20 attendees. This is an updated provision. Noise, this is the quiet hours. And if there's been noise complaints, put in a noise sensor, which this is a product that exists on the market that records data real time and provide data to the planning and building department, so that if there are future noise requests, there's a record of what the noise in fact was. And then parking, it's the same parking provisions. And then I do want to highlight that exception to standards C through G may be sought with a special permit. So if your scenario is somewhat different, or if your plan for your parcel is somewhat different than C through G, it's just a process that requires some public review, and you may be able to do it. But we do need to have that increased level of having an eye on the project. And so that includes the per parcel limit. So if you want to have multiple short-term rentals on the same parcel, you could potentially do so. If you want to exceed the neighborhood concentration, your neighbor has an Airbnb, you want to start yours, there also is potentially a pathway, but we just need to take a look at what the potential community impacts might be. I suppose if you want to host, if you have a great, it triggers one of the things, but you want to have events at your place, you can seek that with a special permit. Noise and parking, same deal. Permit term. So this is a provision that only applies to the unhosted short-term rentals. It's for 2 years, and you need to submit a statement of continued operation and have no outstanding violations. And that really wraps up the overview of the ordinance itself. A couple things just to note. We are still proposing to delete the vacation home rental combining zone. We are still proposing to delete the bed and breakfast establishments. Now those would be looked at as hosted short-term rentals. And I think we went over most of these definitions. So with that, Director, would you like to add anything before we open it up?
No, I wouldn't. You did a good job of going through that. Thanks, Keenan. And let's go to the public. And we've got Kristen Decker with her hand up first. And so, Kristen, go ahead and accept the invitation to come into as a panelist and unmute yourself.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, my question is on the short-term rental cap. Is that 2% within each CPA, or is that 2% within all the CPAs combined?
As written, it is to all the CPAs combined. It creates a greater Humboldt Bay area cap, or greater Humboldt Bay cap area. I don't know but it would apply to the whole unit as written right now.
But one of the things that we're going to have to differentiate on is between inland and coastal. And so there will be that distinction. So the inland allocation won't use up the coastal allocation, and the coastal allocation won't use up the inland allocation, if that makes sense.
Okay, great, thank you.
So let's go to Steve Miner.
Go ahead and unmute yourself, Steve. All right, Steve, one last chance.
Hey, let's go to Ross Nusser. Ross, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. My interest here is at 8025 Upper Pacific and Shelter Cove. I appreciate all the work that you've done on this ordinance. It certainly has changed in the past couple of months. My questions are on the per person and per parcel limit. I'm just wanting a little further clarification where the per person limit stemmed from, and then the per parcel limit, what that's trying to achieve.
Thanks.
Sure. So with the, hold on, I'm going to get myself down to that area. So the per person limit, and this applies only to the unhosted, an individual or business shall not own more than 5 parcels with short-term rental permits. This is responding to something that's occurred in communities where, especially when there is a limit on the overall number, there being a business model that people have done where they take over in some cases, or they own quite a share of the short-term rental stock overall. And so wanting to make sure that the economic benefit of the use is, spread between different people and not concentrated.
Yeah, my only comment there is it seems to me like it might open up a door to just create different companies and try and go in. And the per parcel limit, also I just, and I understand that there's an exception that can be made to that for unhosted through a special permit. But I also was kind of wondering the logic on that.
Yeah, so the per parcel, I'm going to pull up so 1 short-term rental per legal parcel. I think this was also largely having to do with just generally community character, and that if you have multiple parcel or multiple dwellings on the same parcel within a community, that somewhat changes the feel of the parcel and potentially the feel of the community. I have heard people describe some units as if it feels like there's a hotel next door, and that's what we're trying to avoid.
Thank you.
Next, we're going to go to Lauren.
Do you want to go back to Ross really quick? I believe
Ross just spoke.
Or Steve.
Or excuse me, Steve Miner.
Steve, go ahead if you can. You need to unmute yourself. There you go.
My question was, and you may have covered it, and I did read the ordinance, but I didn't see on a hosted unit that is not a shared home, it's a separate home. How long is the permit good for, and how much is the permit?
Yeah, so great question. If it's a hosted, you called it a hosted unit, but it's a separate unit on the parcel. So per the definitions in the draft right now, a hosted unit is only when it's a portion of the dwelling where a caretaker lives. So if it's rental of an entire unit, let's say an accessory dwelling unit that was built in 2016, that is looked at as a unhosted unit. And this is, one of those things where I know that that's not a very intuitive use of language, and maybe it's worth revisiting to see if we can come up with a more intuitive thing. But the distinction we're making there is in terms of, it's thinking in terms of housing stock, that if you're renting a whole unit, you're taking an entire unit, housing unit, and putting it to this other use rather than long-term housing. And so the provision that you asked about again was what would the permit process be and what would the cost be?
Yeah.
So the permit process would be the what was laid out in the unhosted short-term rental, and if it meets all of the different standards that are outlined, and you're not seeking an exception to any of them, it would be an administrative permit, which is really intended to be something that can be processed within a matter of days is what we're looking for. And the cost, we don't have an adopted fee schedule for this. It's a proposed new type of permit, but I would expect it to be a couple $100.
And how long does that last?
It would last for a term of 2 years. But the renewal process would be, as long as there are no outstanding violations, it would be just submitting a statement that you intend to continue.
I think Steve's raising a good questions, Keenan, because we didn't quite get those provisions into the hosted unit. And so we need to add those clarifications.
Okay, to the portion of a home?
Yep. Thanks, Steve, for your comment and questions. So next, we're going to go to Laureen Hirschberg. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Great, thank you. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I kind of got a little bit of my question answered on the last one, but I want to just ask a little bit more of that. So I understand that unhosted is when you're not living in the unit where the rental is taking place. So that question, because right now I have a tiny house, I'm in McKinleyville, that I rent out, but I live in the other house on the property. So that would still be considered unhosted, correct? Okay.
Correct.
And then my question about that regarding if you are going to be living where it is hosted, sorry, let me back up. So if you have a home you're just going to rent a room out of, that's hosted, and then would the rates so you said the hosted and unhosted, would the permit price be different for those two things, for if it's hosted or unhosted?
Not necessarily. The permit price would only be different if it's an administrative permit versus a special permit. So
Okay.
if
one of the things we may want to just evaluate, one of the things that struck me as I was listening to you tonight, is looking at to do the hosted through a ZCC. Because
What
those
is that?
are zoning clearance certificate, sorry, is a very minor permit that's would be even less than what an administrative permit is.
Okay.
So appreciate the questions. As Keenan mentioned, we're very much thinking this through, and every time you all have questions and comments, it helps us see things in a little different light. So we really appreciate that.
And then I just had one follow-up question on that. Like you were talking about the question about how many people per unit that can rent and be a guest or renter.
Yeah.
Would that be like, for example, like a unit I have now is a tiny house, and it's got it's essentially a studio. And so there's a bed downstairs. It's a queen size, but there's a little loft space that can also be, someone can stay in that. That's like doesn't have a door. And so
okay.
I usually do a rental that's would be 2 to 4 people, because it just depends on, sometimes there's a family, it's a couple, and then they have 2 kids. It's a lot for the space, but like that works for some people. So how do you designate, like, is it per bedroom, like how many people plus? And then I have another unit that I'm looking at renting that's 2 bedrooms, and then there would be a couch that can pull out. So like, how would you designate because like for me, like if people are comfortable renting it with 2 people for the queen bed and 2 kids for the pull out futon, then I'm fine with that. But I don't know how that would, like, you know, kind of is just a comfort level for the guests, you know, but like for me, like I wanted to know how that would be designated with how the unit would be permitted for people.
Yeah. So the maximum occupancy as it reads right now is that it shall not exceed 2 per bedroom plus 1,
Mhm.
excluding children under 12.
Mm.
So so I don't know if that so you were thinking theoretically that this would maybe it would be tight, but it would be a reasonable fit to have
Mhm.
4 people in there, but that it's not, you couldn't classify it necessarily as 2 bedrooms. Is that what you were?
But yeah, because it's not like technically, you know, it's like I would say you could call it a 1 bedroom, right? Because it's a loft.
It would essentially be considered a 1 bedroom. So as
Right.
Kim was saying, you get 2 for the 1 bedroom, you get 1 extra, and then kids under 12 are
Okay.
regulated. So you could do exactly what you're asking.
Okay, perfect. And so just going forward, it's 2 per bedroom plus additional lodger. Okay, got it. Thank you for that clarification.
Thanks, Lauren. Next, we're going to go to Chip Tipman. Go ahead and unmute yourself, Chip.
Unmute. There, you got me?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, first want to thank you guys for what you're doing, and you have listened to various comments that one size does not fit all. And you've done well at separating some of the rural versus the urban areas. I want to thank you for the farm stay. I think that's very good because it allows for more flexibility in terms of educational processes and education. And also want to thank you for the Good Neighbor Guide. I think the Good Neighbor Guide is a really good example of allowing for self-registration and self-certification. And that being said, if we're going to allow for Good Neighbor Guides, self-certification, is there a possibility that we could also have self-certification for safety in building? So that there is not the need for both building permits, for building inspections, and if the residence that's being rented is being certified by the rentor, by the short-term rental operator, then doesn't that satisfy any kind of liability that you guys have? Because here the owner is saying, yes, I have, my road is going to be safe and my building is safe, and I am not sure why we have to go to all the extremes of making sure that there are building permits for everything. And that gets to my other point is, it would sure be nice if we could have some flexibility in the AOBs and the ADUs, because we're basically saying that because there are other ordinances that cover the accessory dwelling units and the alternative owner builders, because those ordinances exist, that we can't even consider them for short-term rentals. So how do we sort of find a way to skirt around that? Is it only going to be amending those ordinances, the ADU and the AOB? Or is there some way, as I'm saying, that maybe there could be self-registration that would satisfy the county and would provide the safety for the community, and not require that there be extensive building, engineering, plumbing, mechanical, and that kind of thing. So congratulations on what you're doing. You have kind of skirted around the cost, and it would be nice to get a better idea of what's the difference between just a regular administrative permit that we check all the boxes, and then, well, oh gee, there's a couple boxes that haven't been checked, and how much more is that going to up the cost of the permits? Because and I don't think you've established any of those yet, but I hope that they are going to be very lenient and not excessive. We did have some difficulty in transferring from illegal cannabis to cannabis, and I hope that we don't have the same kind of situation between what you guys are saying are unpermitted short-term rentals with now permitted short-term rentals. So keep up the good work about keeping it very simple, administratively easy, and not too encumbering on those who are doing it. But at the same time, we recognize that the neighborhoods need to be cared for and the housing stocks need to be cared for, but one size doesn't fit all, and there are going to be circumstances outside of the urban areas that you're going to want to allow for the both educational and the tourist aspects, and you aren't going to want to dissuade them by having too many permits. You know, you got to have a category 4 road, and you got to. So anyway, thank you for the time, and I appreciate it, and look forward to hearing what you're going to present to the Planning Commission, and let's keep this really simple.
Thanks, Keenan. Before you dive in, I just want to add some things. Chip, I appreciate your comments. And one of the struggles we have is that clarity is the key to simplicity. And Keenan and I were actually having this lively discussion today about category 4 roads in particular. And, you know, we could add all kinds of discretion into this to allow roads that are less than a category 4. But part of the struggle is what we're trying to do is give people a clear pathway. If you can comply with these regulations, boom, the permit is easy. It's all but done. And so that really is part of our objective, is to make it super simple. And that's not to say that can't be, other things can't be considered, category road 4 being one of the things that can be considered, but that discretion adds process. And as bureaucratic as that sounds, it's just the truth we live with. I do appreciate your comments on the ADUs, AOBs, and the SB 9 regulations. And you hinted around this, and your comment is correct in terms of what you all but said, was that we could take those out of this ordinance and not have them in there, but they would still apply. And then what that would do is result in people who are coming in to apply for a short-term rental to find out after they put the application together and done all these things that they can't do it because of some other ordinance provision. And so what this is really trying to do is be a matter of transparency and authenticity, so that the public understands what the requirements are, even if it's emanating from another legal requirement. I think that it is a policy decision whether or not to expand things to AOBs. Unfortunately, the state law dictates with ADUs approved after 2020, and also in SB 9 developments that have been approved. We don't have flexibility there. And then in terms of self-certification, you know, the reality is that we, as the responsible party for administering the building code, we don't really have the ability to defer that responsibility to somebody else. And so that is a huge policy issue that can certainly be discussed in the public hearings, but from a staff level perspective, that's not something that we would recommend. I hope that helps. I don't want to be argumentative. I really appreciate you acknowledging a lot of what we have done. There are just certain things from a staff perspective we don't believe that we can or should modify. The things that we can modify, the things that we can improve, the things that we can change. As you've pointed out, we appreciate that. We've been working hard to try to hear and listen and respond.
Well, thanks on that, John. It's just that if there is a good neighbor guide that is sort of self-certified, how difficult is it to extend self-certification to safety in building and roads? You say that it's not possible, so we need to, if we do want to have self-certification, how do we go about doing that? If you say it's not possible.
Well, so self-certification, would be like allowing everybody to self-certify regardless of the circumstance that their building meets building code. And there are certainly folks out there that I know have built houses without permits, and that house would qualify for compliance with the building code. But then I've also seen some things personally where that was done without a permit, and while they would say that it's safe and all that, it's really not good. And so the way the law, the building code is set up is that there is checks and balances to make sure that structures that are being put in place, people can rely on that structure to be safe. And that is not only for the current owner or current builder, but also for the unsuspecting public that would buy it later and have no idea of how that's done. Because when we make decisions about land use, it's not just about the person who is doing it now. It's about that being there for the foreseeable future for a very long time.
Yes, I I can understand that. I guess the confusion is the stays that are over 30 days, the long-term rentals, there is no regulations. There's no building permit, there's no road category, there's nothing. So if you're doing long-term, and that is 30 days long-term, 31 days is the definition. So over 31, there's none of these regulations apply. So, there's been somehow or other you're able to accept that a long-term renter who's moving into a place that is an AOB or an ADU or is unpermitted is okay. But now that under 30, there is, we have these restrictions.
We're not saying that. We're not saying that it's okay for a house to be rented out on a long-term or short-term basis without a building permit. We're also not saying that it's okay for an AOB to be rented out on a long-term basis. That is actually contrary to the law. We are saying that whether it's a short-term or a long-term rental, it does require a building permit. Alternative owner builder is a provision that was created for people to be able to construct their own homes using alternative materials and methods. And that was really for the owner. It's not to be used as a short or a long-term rental. And those are distinct differences. So I hope you see that line.
Yeah, I understand that. What I hadn't realized that there were ordinance provisions and requirements for long-term rentals. I'm completely unfamiliar. Can you fill us in on what those are?
Well, it has to do with the structure being permitted. I mean, structures are required to be permitted, whether it's being occupied by the owner, by a long-term renter, or a short-term renter. It gets down to the building code.
I see. Okay. I understand now. Thank you for your time. Sorry to take so much, and I look forward to
it's okay. I know these are issues for a lot of folks. You're representing a lot of voices. So thanks, Chip.
Okay, I'll sign off and look forward to the rest of the conversation. Thanks a bunch.
Thanks. Going to go next to Diane Desmaret.
Hi, folks. I attended the McKinleyville area meeting, And there have been some changes I can see now. I was hoping to have this in front of me, but it hadn't been up for the coastal area. Anyway, and my question has to do with a rural neighborhood that is a private road. It is a short road, dead end, but it's dense as far as the number of residential parcels on that road. The road is not category 4. We have paved part of it through due diligence and hard work over the years with our road association. But it is not a category 4. If there is, so going to the neighborhood quality, this neighborhood is a residential neighborhood, always has been. It is, like I said, the housing is dense, even though it is a small rural neighborhood. So having a situation where a parcel that has 3 units on it was sold, and when it was sold, the residential use was dropped, and the new owner changed a triplex into 3 vacation rental units at the end of the dead end road. So my question is, in that situation, can the person who is operating these 3 vacation rentals on one parcel on a dead-end private road use this exception permit type thing to get around the road category requirement, the number of units allowed on one parcel? Like I said, it's a private road. We get no funding from the county. We have to maintain that road. That's one of my questions. How is someone going to be able to use the exceptions in order to somehow get around our neighborhood being able to maintain its residential quality of life? It's which you keep or neighborhood quality, which is mentioned repeatedly in your ordinance as a primary concern. So that's one of the things I'd like to have more clarification on. Also, as far as lessening regulation in relationship to these short-term rentals, are they still being classified as a business? Do they still have to have a business license? Because I would think that I think that should be what it is. And if it is, then not having inspections, etc., how could you not have that? Because a business, any business has to have a certain level of regulation and inspection. So those are right now 2 things that I'm listening to and looking at, and would like a little more clarification on.
Yeah, thank you. Those are both very good questions. I'll start with the question about the neighborhood quality with the road. So as you identified, it sounds like there were 3 ways in which, in this scenario, it is not allowable with an administrative permit, the scenario that you described. The first is that it's not a category 4 road. So the second is that the neighborhood concentration on parcels that are less than an acre. The third is the per parcel limit. So for 3 reasons, that's a project that would require a special permit. And so what a special permit process triggers is that notice would be sent to all the neighbors, and that if there is concern about the potential impacts, then it could go to a public hearing. And the hearing officer when considering a special permit, would be required to make the findings that I listed at the beginning. And those findings are that the short-term rental would not result in significant adverse effects on the health, safety, welfare of the community, and the short-term rental would not result in significant adverse effects on the quality of the neighborhood. And so depending on what is said, what is shared about the neighborhood by the people that live there, that is the finding that would need to be made in order to approve a special permit. And if the finding cannot be made, the special permit would not be approved. Does that answer that question?
Yes, but when you say the neighbors, so would be notified, how is that our whole road, or the thing of neighbors within this many feet or this many parcels? Who would be notified?
Yeah, and a notice of intent to approve gets sent to, do you remember what the radius is?
I believe that's adjacent. I think it's, let me look that up.
Because where we are, this is it's a short but densely populated private road. So, and it's dead end. So if a unit established at the end of the dead end, that impacts the whole road. So it would seem that the whole road, those people who are not accepting of having this modification to the quality of the neighborhood, all the people on the road should be able to be involved in a discussion of that, because it is a dead end road. and the unit is at the end of the dead end road.
So we could add that into the noticing procedures. One of the things, Diane, that we do right now for, I hate to say it, but for cannabis permits is that we identify what we call a haul route, which is the access, and people along that route get notified. So that's not uncommon to notify the people along a private road of what is being considered.
Okay.
And then to your question about the business license, this is something that I think we've spoken to in every meeting we've gone to. But the business license, it's a requirement of the treasurer tax collector. It's not our code. It's not our department. And it's another one of those cases where, we included the provision, like essentially more as a courtesy to just kind of notify people. But if you're running a business, you do need to get a business license. So it is not within our authority to say whether or not you need a business license. It is squarely within the authority of the treasurer tax collector, and they will require a business license for that type of business.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm seeing 300 feet as the notice radius. So, and then for private roads, Keenan, we should probably look at notifying people along the private road.
Okay.
So next we're going to go to Donna Hufford. Go ahead and unmute yourself. Donna, welcome.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So I noted that in the section about limiting of the number of rentals, it didn't appear to me that the Oric community was involved in the limiting area. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so if we have 100 units in our community and 25 of them are probably already an Airbnb, that won't be addressed?
It can be, if the comment is that ORIC should also be included. I think we stop short of ORIC, but we can certainly move out there. There are other provisions, I believe, though, too, that may address some of the numbers in ORIC because of the concentration.
Yeah, so exactly the concentration provisions would apply within ORIC. However,
what were they?
Those are that essentially on parcels that are smaller than an acre, which for parcels that are kind of within the more developed area of ORIC, those would definitely be smaller than an acre, that short-term rentals cannot exceed 10% of the dwellings on the access road. And as the crow flies, the nearest 10 dwellings can't be short-term rentals. Okay. And so if someone were to try to have multiple along the same road or exceed that 10%, or have a cluster, then that would trigger a special permit, which is what we were talking about, having that public review or the potential for public review to discuss if this would change the quality of the neighborhood.
I'm not suggesting that we want to be in that limit of 2% for the area. So, yeah, let's not talk about that. But the other item that I had a question about was ADA requirements in these units. Is that a situation that's going to come up?
You're asking about ADA requirements?
Yes.
So normally that's a building code requirement, not a zoning ordinance requirement. And the limitation that's going to be there is ADA is actually not administered through code. It's administered through litigation, unfortunately. So we were not going to require houses or units to be retrofitted to comply with ADA, but that would be a liability on the part of the property owner if somebody decided to come around and start looking at short-term rentals and determining whether or not they comply with ADA requirements as a transient occupancy unit.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Forward to this passing.
Next, we're going to go to Tyler Martin. Go ahead and unmute yourself, Tyler.
There you go. Am I unmuted?
Yeah,
we can hear you.
Yeah, okay, cool. My question is about road category 4s. Is it going to be similar to the cannabis ordinance in that you can bring an engineer out there to certify that it's passable, or is that just straight into special permit territory?
Straight into special permit territory.
Cool. Simple. That was all I wanted to know.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Next, we're going to go to Jana Chapman. Go ahead and unmute yourself, Jana. Thanks.
Yeah. Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. Can you speak more to farm stays? I'm in Arcata, but zoned county, and I'm also zoned agricultural general. What does that mean?
So what that would mean is that in order to have a short-term rental, there needs to be, some component of a farm stay. So again, with going back to the definition there, farm stays are a form of short-term rental which include the option and focus for guests to participate in educational, recreational, or social activities on the property that feature agricultural use. And so the idea here is that ag parcels, we see the primary use as still being agricultural, and that the short-term rental is essentially kind of an accessory use to the agriculture, that you are that it's engaged in the agricultural use of the property.
Okay, and then to still have it be permitted, all the other guidelines, I'm assuming, apply as well. I just have to have, in addition to those, some sort of like agricultural focus
Yes.
provided. Okay, cool. Thank you.
Next, we're going to go to Christine. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi. Thank you guys. I had a quick question. I joined a bit late, so I just wanted a little bit of clarification on property. Someone had brought up a triplex, and my triplex was recently built last year. And it's technically a primary with 2 ADUs, but it's all one building, and I do live here. So we all share walls. I am the one that kind of takes care of everything. So is that considered hosted or unhosted? And what does that mean for permits and all that? Sorry, again, I joined it a bit late, so sorry about that.
Yeah, very good question. And so since it sounds to me like these were 2 accessory dwelling, as far as the process that you went through, these are 2 accessory dwelling units that were permitted after 2020, that those would not be eligible for permitting as short-term rentals, because that's the provision in the ADU rules. So if you wanted to host a portion of the residence where you live, like host or like rent out a bedroom in your residence, then that would be available to you. But unfortunately, the other 2 would not.
So they'd have to be long-term rentals.
Yes.
Or midterm rentals. Is there any stipulation in this about midterm rentals, people who are staying for, like someone said, over 31 days?
Nope. These are provisions for under 30, or if it's 30 or under.
Okay. Okay. So just to clarify, the other 2, my ADUs, since it was built last year, they have to be longer than 30 days. There's no special permit, no nothing. I can't do anything about it.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Next, we're going to go to Zach Stanton.
Hey there, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, my name's Zach Stanton. I was born and raised here in Humboldt County, and I'm a full-time carpenter, and I've been operating a short-term rental since 2019. I currently reside in a residence with an attached ADU. It's an attached mother-in-law. This was built in early 90s, so none of the post 2019 or 2020 stuff applies. I'm just wondering why. I would assume that, everything under the same roof, or I heard a lady speak earlier about her little house on her same property, that you guys might consider classifying those as hosted. I advertise mine as such, and that I live on the site, and I've never had any complaints or any guests that were unruly because of that. I don't know what benefits, just because they're staying in your actual unit in a bedroom, that you would get that wouldn't extend a unit that's under the same roof or even on the same property. And then the other thing, the other question was if you guys currently have any data on what percentage of the current housing stock is being used for short-term rentals. The cap's at 2%. Are we close to that cap? Is there room in it? And then I'm assuming areas like Arcata that already have their own regulations aren't included in that number. And that's all I have. Thanks.
Great. Yeah, thank you. Again, very good questions. The first is with regard to what's considered hosted versus unhosted. It really is, I guess it's helpful to think about the sort of the 3 sets of values that we're really targeting, that with the definition of hosted being a portion of the unit, we're targeting both the neighborhood quality, because of course it's unlikely that someone would egregiously break all the rules when you're in the same unit as as the host. That is also true of probably being in the ADU in the back. The difference between the ADU in the back and the room in your house is the question of housing stock, which is one of the other values. And so we created this streamlined process because when you're renting a bedroom in your house, you're not taking a unit off of the long-term market because you still live there, or the caretaker lives there. Whereas the unit in the back, could theoretically be a long-term rental to meet the housing needs within the community. So that's the logic behind where we drew that line. And I see the director.
Yeah, there's an other important point that you should point out. That's a difference between the short-term rental hosted and unhosted. And I'm probably being too esoteric because I can see in your eyes you're not getting it. Sorry, it's also, Zach, that hosted units are not counted in the cap.
Got it. Thank you.
And then in relation to the cap, yes, we are only looking at units that are in the unincorporated areas, not within the cities. And B, I know that I was doing this math just earlier today that I think this is approximate, but I think within the cap area, between Trinidad and Rio Del, this is the inland portion, there are approximately 17,000 units. And so 2% of 17,000 dwelling units would be 346. I unfortunately, I don't yet have the data of how many short-term rentals are within the same area. I need to get back in touch with our GIS guy, but I definitely want to have that number ready for the Planning Commission meeting later this month. It's it's a really good question, but that the total number of short-term rentals that we believe are in the unincorporated county is, I've seen the number fluctuate a little bit, but it's somewhere in the ballpark of 800. Quite a few of those are that there are hubs outside of the Humboldt Bay area. Shelter Cove is definitely a hub. Southern Humboldt and along Avenue of the Giants has definitely a considerable amount. I'm not sure where it lies in relation to that about 340-ish figure. But we'll have more data at the next meeting.
Okay, so I mean, it sounds like there's going to be less permits than the available short-term rentals out there. In other words, this is people are going to miss out. Like the cap's gonna.
We're not ready, Zach. We're not ready to say that. And
okay.
And we need to let the facts speak for that, because the other thing that we've done is that we've excluded the hosted rentals from that. We don't know how many, frankly, of the existing short-term rentals are hosted.
Is 2% something that you guys have just come up with? Is that something comparable what other municipalities or counties have done? Is that just that number, is that where that comes from? Because it feels like, to me, you could close down every short-term rental in the county tomorrow and you're not going to do much about, rental prices or housing costs. I mean, I think it's a bigger issue. And then, if you're going to prohibit it, you're going to lose out on a lot of tourist money. I mean, I'd heard that read that in the next 5 years, the levels be 3/4.
Zach, you're breaking up quite a bit right now.
He actually just dropped from the Zoom.
Okay. So Neil Cleveland, it's your turn. Thanks for being patient.
Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, my name's Neil Cleveland. I own a property in the Trinidad area on the east side of 101. It has a ADU that was built before 2020. And I used to live in the area back in the 70s, and I'm kind of migrating back up there. One of my family members was there. So I thought I'd just throw out a question at a time. My first question is, in the application, 61.05, it speaks to how this process is going to be treated, meaning, is there going to be a horse race for application? And if this guy just spoke, I thought he was hitting on a good point. We really don't know if there's any more room. Are a lot of people going to be left out, so to speak? And then, is it first come, first served? Is it horse race? Are there going to be exclusions? I've been in a few of these, and they can get pretty dicey. And then I got another question. Then I'd like to hear the answers on that one as well. But the second question is, this 2% thing, I think, still needs more qualification, more quantitative data. It needs a little more study. It's a big, huge task to try and really nail down a number. And I think you guys have done a great job of trying to create this form and substance here. But if people knew, you know, hey, there's only a few that are going to be issued, I think they should know that. I'd just like to hear first on those two questions. The horse race, and then maybe more study on the 2% factor. What's the real number look like, and how has it been stress tested in the form that this prior guy talked about?
Yeah, thanks, Neil. In terms of the horse race, as you call it, that is still something that we don't have resolved yet, and we'll have either a policy document that's external to the ordinance in terms of how that's going to be done, or we'll embed it in the ordinance, and should have that ready by the time we get to the workshop with the Planning Commission, because we recognize that there will be distinct decisions to be made with all of the existing folks that will understandably want to get their permit and be legal. So thank you for raising that point. That is a really important one. In terms of the 2%, yeah, we agree. Well, this number came out of other ordinances, as the previous caller asked. It's not something that we just kind of pulled out of the air. It's really something that is used elsewhere. And so we do want to, as Keenan mentioned, he's doing the heavy lifting of researching that, trying to understand what the implications of that are, seeing if we can beat down the data to a point to understand the difference between hosted and unhosted. And we will have that before the workshop, because you're right. We need to talk about what we're doing and what the real implications are. If there's an allowance, and I'm just using gross terms here, of 340, as Keenan mentioned, but within that area there's 500 short-term rentals, maybe 2% is not the right number. And so that will be a real policy decision for the Planning Commission and the board, and we will provide the information to help them understand the implications of what that decision represents.
Very helpful. Next question is non-transferability. You know, there are situations, and I get it, people horse trading, trying to pass on this permit. But what about it when a family sells or gifts the house or the property to a family member? And I think maybe there should be some kind of accommodation, not to be void of, hey, are you complying, but more about, gee, what if someone wants to bought this house, they want to sell it to their kids, or they want to transfer it? I think there should be some room there. And then second question on this part is just like to get a quick definition of a category four road. I don't really, I'm embarrassed to say it, but I haven't seen your road standard, so I don't know it.
No, those are fair questions. So in terms of transferability, one of the struggles that we're trying to address is the whole idea of speculation on houses. And so if you assign a permit to a house, then it assigns additional value to that house and it changes the value of that. And that begins to affect property values. And one of the things that we're concerned about is these STR permits becoming commodities. And unfortunately, we did see that with the cannabis industry, with permits, and particularly with a certain type of permit. I won't belabor that right now, but they started getting sold as a commodity. And you know, if that starts to happen with our housing stock, then it'll affect property values. Understand the desire to protect generational wealth, but you know, again, is it the house that's getting passed on, the short-term rental? What is it that's getting passed on? This is, you know, really a business, and it's a balance between trying to address, you know, preventing these from becoming commodities and allowing families to do family planning and things like that. And so that's really what we're trying to balance. We're really citing on the fact that we are seeing within Humboldt County and other areas of the state, short-term rentals turning into commodities, which are affecting property values. In terms of a Category 4 road, it's basically a road that's between 18 and 20 feet wide. At other meetings, you've heard that a Category 4 road has a 50-foot right-of-way, and I think fundamentally that's true. But from our perspective, what we're really looking for is that there is two-way travel available on the road. And the importance of that is for emergency response.
Yeah, I have a quick, I don't know how many of you will are on this. I think actually many of you will see this because you're on Zoom. Do a quick screen share here. You're seeing the wrong screen. No.
Yep.
Are you seeing the roadway?
Yep.
Okay, great. So this is in the code, and again, exactly as the director described, 18 to 20 feet, 4-foot shoulder. Yeah, right of way 50 feet. But again, we're focused on the emergency response. But it does exist, the description in the code. And this is, if you're curious, in the section on design standards for roadway categories, which is in this very memorable appendix to Division 2 of Title 3, establishing subdivision design and improvement standards.
Very helpful.
Okay.
Last 2 points on neighborhood quality and public nuisance concentration. This is an interesting analysis. So I own 3.5 acres of property, and I have a home on it, and then I have an ADU over a garage. It's serviced by a road that shares 4 properties. The total acreage on the 4 properties is 15 acres. So there's 4 homes, 1 on each parcel. And so I look at that and I tried to apply your application whereby you take 20% of 4 homes, which is 0.8. So it's not a true home. It's a partial one. And so you could really only put 1 more. There's 15 acres with 4 homes. Maybe I'm doing the math wrong, but 20% of 4 homes is 0.8. So you really can only do 1 home one short-term rental on 15 acres where there's 4 parcels served by 1 road. I'm trying to understand, is that a fair application? And there's nobody else on that street that could get another short-term rental, even though we're on 15 acres total. I just want to make sure I'm understanding how you got there.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that the idea that on a road like that, if you do have multiple residences, you know, multiple out of 4 parcels that are short-term rentals, you know, that's a really significant proportion of the houses, right? That would be on 50% of the parcels served by a road having short-term rentals. And it's not a prohibition on that. It's just saying that it would need to be a special permit and that you would need to make those community or, you know, neighborhood quality findings in order to get it.
Okay, I understand that. And then lastly, just a thought. Has there been any more discussion on a grandfathered permit for those units that have been in existence that comply with the building code, that aren't in violation, that they existed before the moratorium, they've paid their transient occupancy tax, and no outstanding violations, no neighborhood complaints, and they've been collecting rent. Is there any consideration for that? I just a thought, like
That's Neil, that's still an option that we're working on that we don't have a good answer for tonight.
I appreciate it, and I just want to thank both of you, and I want to thank Keenan. I've had a couple good conversations, productive. Didn't always agree, but very, very professional, and I appreciate your guys' approach to the process here. Thank you.
Thanks, Neil.
Thank you.
So as we go to additional people, I want to just be mindful of the time. It's now 7:27 and I'm showing 15 people that want to talk. Some of you have already talked. So what I'm going to ask you to do is bring up the points that you want to bring up. If they've already been brought up, just mention that you're concerned about that. You recognize it's been talked about. And we're gonna, to the extent that we can, really limit the dialogue and really just focus on getting comments, because I want to be respectful of all of our time. So with that being said, we're going to go to Tracy Montfort. Go ahead and unmute yourself, Tracy.
Hi, thank you so much. Appreciate all that you're doing and the clarity. I'm still confused. So I'll just tell you my situation, and then maybe you can guide me as to if what I'm doing is possible and how I would go about. We live on 6.5 acres. We're on a road that's maintained and all that, more than it's it's North Bank Road. So basically, you know what that is. We have a very long driveway. We're very far away from our neighbors. I'd say, I don't know if there's anyone within 300 feet. I know there are within 1,000. We have a unit in our home. So we are owner, what's that called? Owner hosted?
Hosted, yeah.
Hosted. We also have an ADU that was permitted before 2020. So back in the 80s when the place was built. And we rent them both out. So what I'm hearing is that I would have to choose and only have the one, or I'd have to have some kind of a special permit. Would I even be able to get one for my ADU? And I do just want to say, this is our retirement income and the way we have figured out not to lose our home. When my husband was diagnosed with cancer and can't work quite as much as he used to, and we're both in our 60s, this is our income. We would not ever rent out our ADU as a long-term house to anyone. We enjoy our privacy. We enjoy being able to not rent our cottage, for example, when our kids come from out of town, you know, Thanksgiving, holidays, things like that. We don't want to have full-time renters here who will then think of it as their home and start inviting their families and their friends over. So what we love about being super hosts is that we we can limit how many people stay in there, which seems like that's your goal as well. We've never had a complaint. People do not party here or make loud noises. Everyone's very respectful. And we feel that if we ever open that up to a long-term rental, we'd have a harder time, having somebody have to be evicted if they didn't follow those types of rules. We don't want people here all the time. We love that they come spend the night and go out and do the touristy things during the day. This is our property. So how do we continue to do what we're doing and be able to earn the income that we need to earn and provide this really valuable service to the community for tourism, for parents who are coming to see their Cal Poly students, and they have a really great place to stay. We've got farm animals they interact with, they love them. It's not like staying in a hotel, and that's why people seek this out.
Yeah, great, thank you. So I believe that, with regard to the per parcel limit, that would be a question of a special permit. And so then it would be the notice being sent to the neighbors. And as long as it's, again, it's not having an impact on the neighborhood quality, which it sounds like you're far from your neighbors and that's not your concern in particular, then you could get the special permit and have multiple on the same parcel.
Okay,
so
that's great. So Chip had mentioned that it hasn't been announced anywhere that I've been able to find either. How much is this special permit?
So a special permit, it's again an administrative special permit. That's how it's listed on the thing. For the purposes of us, a special permit costs $1,400 is the base price, and then there are a couple like referral fees that get added on top of that. So let's say looking at probably about $1,600 for a special permit.
And that's every 2 years?
No, that would be one time, and then and then the renewal process is it's just submitting a statement that you will continue. So I don't know if there'll be a charge associated with renewal or not, but it would be low if there is one.
Okay, so, and I just want to put in my vote for you really strongly considering the grandfathering in for people who've been running these Airbnb. I mean, we started in 2017. And I'm getting nervous. I'm getting really nervous that there's not going to be enough and that somehow I won't get in fast enough because I don't know why. I don't know how long the line's going to be or how you guys are going to handle that. And then our income's going to be gone and we're going to lose our home. So this is something that we lose sleep over. I just want to put that out there. This isn't something that is just no big deal to us. This is our livelihood.
Yeah.
Thanks,
thank you for
Tracy.
sharing that.
Yep.
Yeah. Thank you.
Next, we're going to go to John the Kitchen.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, thanks. I appreciate your time. I appreciate that. I think there's been an effort to try to simplify this, but just in listening tonight, I think it becomes really apparent that it is not simple. It is not simple enough. And with a potential for, let's say, 800 applicants for existing ones, I just have to imagine I manage 16 vacation rentals in the unincorporated county, and based on your categories that, although you've simplified, are still complex because we're a rural community. This isn't like if it were all like maybe McKinleyville proper, but these are complex rural communities. So of the 16 I manage, and I don't own them, I'm guessing maybe one of them would qualify for an administrative permit. Most of them are going to go to special permits. And I just have to believe that that's going to be the majority. And I just don't see how the county, you guys are going to be buried in this with sending out notices to neighbors and then having, hearings. And then it's then one person, it is the person that decides on those hearings a very, very subjective decision over neighborhood, quality of neighborhood. And I just don't think it's simple enough. I really, really encourage you consider eliminating the neighborhood concentration aspect until you really know, like go through the application process, see how many people apply for these permits, and then you'll have a map, because every time someone asks you, where are these, how many numbers, you guys just don't know. And I just think I would love to see the county take a few steps back and make it easier, create a simpler pathway, and see what you have. Is it really a problem? Is neighborhood concentration? I have several on streets where they're really well managed and they're not a problem. And I just think that it would be better to go after that maybe at a later date, but to first just find out who applies where they are at, so that you have a map of how many are in the greater Trinidad area, how many are in the Rio Del area, how many are in the Blue Lake area, you know, and do you have major concentrations in areas where you're actually getting complaints and significant violations? Because if they're not, why go after and eliminate these based on concentration when you've got some good, you have many good, well-managed places. So I really encourage you to consider dropping some of these limitations. The cost of permits is astounding to me. I mean, Trinidad's is 300. I wish I had the city of Arcata's in front of me. I want to say it's maybe 150, but don't quote me. I can see why your permit would be high, because the amount of staff time that it's going to take the county to process these is huge. But given that the county
Hey, Donna, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Did you hear what Keenan said the cost was going to be for an administrative permit?
No, I'm talking about the special permit, which I'm guessing a great majority of these are going to end up being.
Based upon the maps that we see, we would disagree with that.
Really? With roads, with
Yep.
septic, with neighborhood concentration, with all of those criteria?
Where's the septic criteria in there?
I don't have it sitting in front of me. So septic isn't a criteria.
We took that out.
You took that out. So the main criteria for it being a special permit
Is functionally related to the impact that it would have on the neighborhood. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So I would just encourage you to reread it and make sure that you've read it.
Oh, I've read it. I still am like many other callers. I still find it really confusing.
What I would like to understand then is that if you say you've got 16, help us understand how none of those would qualify for an administrative permit.
Well,
you have not identified anything. I don't mean to be argumentative here. It's just
I understand.
And I want to understand what it is that's causing you to make these comments. It's easy to be critical.
Yeah, no, I know. Well, roads are an issue that I'm completely unfamiliar with. So category 4 roads, you know, that's a whole other criteria that I have to go look at and see, is Scenic Drive in Trinidad a category 4? Are some of these I really don't know. Is Baker Ranch Road areas, you know, so there are a lot of homes on roads that Stagecoach, you know, there are roads that I really don't know. This is beyond the scope. So when I sit to look at applying or helping my owners apply, I don't even know. So we have to try to look at all these maps and understand things that are far beyond the scope of what we're used to dealing with. Neighborhood concentration is an issue. You know, you know, I manage several homes that are in close proximity to other homes. And I think loosening that neighborhood concentration was a move in the right direction, but I just don't know that there, again, is data to show that it's really problematic. And I think going after first getting the permit process underway and seeing what's really what passes muster? You know, how many people are going to be able to actually jump through all these hoops, and how long is this process actually going to take? So those are some of my concerns. And I guess one of my comments, just going back to the transferability, and I understand the transferability, and you know, but I do have to point out that a house is a commodity, and a business permit and running a business is a commodity. And they do both have price tags associated with them. And when you invest in a home, and then you invest in setting up a home as a rental, whether it be short-term or long-term, I was a realtor for a short time, and if I could sell a house that showed it had a rental history as a long-term rental, that had value. And a short-term rental has value. People have invested in that. So, I mean, I don't think you can eliminate the fact that these things are commodities when they are, and they all affect the housing prices. So, you know, the good neighbor brochure, I do really strongly feel that the county it would behoove the county to draft up a good neighbor brochure. And I've said it in writing, and I've said it at the other meeting. I don't think that should be arbitrary. I think what you call a good neighbor brochure is not a brochure. It's a good neighbor contract. It's more of a directory. And I think that being good neighbors is really important. And I think it's important to have the county craft up some good basic guidelines that get posted in these rentals and get shared out to the guests staying in the homes. That's what we do at Trinidad Retreats. We've done it for a very long time. It works exceedingly well. And I think the county, for the millions of dollars they've collected for decades, can afford and should afford to publish these things and to distribute them, because doing that as the crow
Donna,
flies.
you've been talking for 7 minutes now, and I've got now 17 other people who would like to talk in the next 18 minutes.
Okay, well, I've been sitting listening to people repeat themselves, so I thought I was bringing up some points that I think are valid that I would really like to see addressed. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Jonna.
Okay, next, we're going to go to Samantha Wilson.
Hi, thank you for hosting this meeting. My name is Samantha Wilson, owner of my Humboldt abode. My question is, I'm a super host, and I recently received a call from a gentleman in San Jose asking if he were to purchase properties in Shelter Cove, if I would be his host. And that made me really uncomfortable. So I want to know if permits will only be issued to Humboldt County residents, because I heard that there was an issue to the part of the moratorium put in place was to squash out any speculation for real estate development. So that's my first question. And then also with regard to the good neighbor guide, is it vice versa? I have a good neighbor who likes to rock out to heavy metal music, and I'm not sure of the decibel reading, but is that good neighbor guide going to be vice versa? So if you can answer both of those questions, I'm going to keep my comment short.
Great,
as
thank
to
you.
allow other.
Thank you, Samantha. Go ahead, Keenan.
So to the first question about there being a residency requirement, there is not a residency requirement. The limit that we have in the draft right now is a per person, and what that is how many parcels you can own that have a short-term rental on it, and the limit is 5. And then to the point of there being a reciprocal good neighbor guide, I mean, perhaps Director Ford, you can I don't know exactly what the sheriff's protocol is with responding to noise complaints, but there isn't a planning provision controlling it.
That's correct. And
As far as
understand,
decibel.
yeah, no, if somebody is creating a nuisance, the sheriff's department will come out and have a talk with them. And if it persists, can take further action. I'll just say too, we are in our work program working on a noise ordinance to try to address that. So your comment, your concern is, we're sympathetic towards that.
And just to follow up with one last question to allow others to speak, will established bed and breakfasts or short-term rentals be given priority in the permit process? I mean, I hear you say that that's a magic 8-ball question.
Yeah. We need to look at that. There's some legal parameters there that we just need to understand a little bit better. And quite honestly, we've not been able to really further explore that to the extent that we need to before we start talking about it publicly with our county counsel's office.
Okay, so it hasn't been part of the draft. It's just kind of, we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I know that's probably an unsatisfactory answer, but we just don't have a good answer right now.
Okay, thank you, John.
Brian Montano, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, yes. I just had a couple questions, couple points so I could get other people some time to talk. The first thing was I'm not really seeing the benefit to the farm stay or what that does for the people zoned ag other than the education. I'm confused why they're only limited one permit per parcel. Similar to another lady, I have the same thing off North Bank where we have 2 Airbnbs. It's totally feasible. Nobody even knows we're doing it. So I don't see the reason why that's limited. The inspections that the building department wants to do for the properties, I again don't understand why that's required. Most of us have to carry liability insurance for homeowners and property. So I don't see the use in the county coming out here and telling me what the buildings, safer or whatnot when we carry liability insurance for those purposes. Again, as far as the cap goes, I'm just unclear why it's 2%. Other businesses in the county, it's a free market, so you can compete. So it's based off how good your Airbnb is and how good your service is, just like the other hotels. So I think the cap should be removed. We live in a free market. This gives the businesses an opportunity to compete against each other. And then again, just like cannabis, with the permitting process transferring, all we're going to get is a bunch of LLCs and straw man hiding behind, this name, that name, all these random emails. So it really does nothing for the residents of the county. And again, I would just speak to the special permits and the cost of that. I'm in agreement with the other lady. And again, John, I don't know, I'd have to see it myself, but I think most of them are going to be special permits based off the easements and the roads. McKinleyville, out in Arcata, a lot of us who are zoned ag, we have all these crazy road things. So I'm really upset having to pay $1,400. That's a lot of money for us. And, we try to do what we do to make it. My property tax is already $11,000 a year. So it's just another added thing, money for this, money for that. And I'm just wondering, what does this do for the county? Are you guys going to, advertise short-term rentals, all this $1,400, all these permits coming from us? What does it do to benefit us as business owners? And again, I'll keep my comments short because I know there's other people that want to talk.
Thanks.
Thanks, Brian. Not going to respond to everything right now, but we are taking the comments and do respect what you're saying. As part of the workshop, we'll endeavor to make sure that we're addressing these just so we can get people's comments in, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you. So Lisa Johnson, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, this is a general question. I'm wondering if the county has or will the county develop a database for the category 4 roads to help people identify what they might be looking at in terms of a permit process? Or does some other agency have this kind of database? Or do you have to have somebody come out either from the county or an engineer or whatever to look at your road?
I'll just say quickly, we do have some, but not all listed. There is a list of category 4 roads that we have. And one of the things that we talked about today is developing something on our website so people would know and how to determine whether it's category 4 or not. We don't want to make it complicated.
Okay, perfect. Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. We're going to go to Nova's iPhone. Did I lose you, Nova?
They removed themselves.
Okay, Maureen Chase, go ahead and unmute yourself.
We can hear you now.
Oh, you can hear me. Great. So you made a little comment about the 2% cap might be different for the coastal zone. I just wasn't clear on that. I wanted a little clarity if the coastal zone would be included in that 2% cap.
Yeah, so
go ahead, Keenan.
So a 2% cap would also be applied for the community plan areas within the greater Humboldt Bay area, but it would be calculated separate from the inland area. So we would look at how many are the residences in the coastal area and calculate 2% from that, which I don't have the figure on the tip of my tongue. I do have it in my notes. If you follow up with me, I'm sure I can get it to you. It'll be featured in the workshop, to be sure.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, Maureen. We're going to go to John Lee now. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi there. Thank you for having me. And well, did I unmute?
Yes.
Yes. Yep.
Oh,
Oops.
no, now we lost you.
I think I may have done that. John, go ahead and raise your hand again. There he is.
How about now?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, great. I had emailed Keenan this afternoon. This pertains to AOB. I'm sure that's a thorn in your side. This is a 2014 permit, which would have required, sprinklers among many things. I think I'd pass structural and all the other things, but I did not put sprinklers in, nor do I have any interest in. That would throw me into special permit. Is there still a path if I'm not wanting to do sprinklers, or do I have to get, since it's a 2014 build permit, do I have to put sprinklers in to get to that point? It's a pretty cut and dried question.
Yes, you would have to put sprinklers in.
The entire house?
Yes.
I can't just do it in the one. This is a hosted. I rent out one room, 2 people, separate, private entrance, sealed off from the rest of the house, but it is in the house. I would have to do the entire house.
I've not had that specific question asked. Let me do a little research and we will address that at the Planning Commission workshop.
I mean, there's smoke detectors, there's carbon monoxide detectors, and it's an all electric house, so there's not really a big risk of fire, but obviously there is still some risk of fire. It's prohibitive to try to do sprinklers in there. I've been doing this for 4 years, and it's structurally sound as far as AOB. All the other things would meet the criteria, but there's no path if there's no sprinklers. And Keenan, I emailed you this, and this you can address this, on an email if you guys want to smoke that out and figure it out. But
yeah, I don't think we're equipped to answer that specific question tonight, John. We need to give that some thought and do some research.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thanks.
When will you post 9.1 in coastal? Because it wasn't posted as of today.
I'm gonna try to get to that tomorrow. It's gonna be very
Okay.
similar, but I know it's important. I'll try to get it there tomorrow.
It's functionally the same as the inland, though, right?
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Thank you.
Hey, Kim Bynum, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hey, this is Mike Bynum, her husband.
Hey, Mike.
Hey there. Appreciate you having me. I pretty much have the same question as Tracy earlier, where we have a 1 acre up in Trinidad and we've built an ADU. And all the boxes are checked, every single one except the permit, the ADU permit. And we were at the last meeting and spoke to John and asked him. Kim asked, and he was like, yeah, just come talk to me. There's a path. And we've called and they really didn't understand what was going on. So, what is the path? How should we go about this?
So the path to the permitting was just referenced by John Lee. You can get a permit for it if you permitted under ADU.
Yes, sir.
So you can get a permit based upon the year that it was constructed, and that was pre-2020.
It wasn't. It was 21.
So then if it was constructed under the zoning ordinance at that time, that ADU was not eligible to be used as a short-term rental.
There's no path whatsoever.
No, that's embedded within the ADU ordinance and within state law.
Can't change the permit anyway, anyhow.
No.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry. Going to go to Judith Tengbon.
Hi, thank you. I noticed that you included private roads in your updated guidelines, but I really would like more. Every parcel on our road that is purchased by an individual is automatically included in the road association per the title and the road association guidelines. I would like the business owner to compensate the road members for the additional use of the road. I went out to get my trash can today, and in the 4 minutes that I was out there to get mail and trash can, 2 short-term rental vehicles went by. I know who lives on my road. And the travel is more than what a residential use would be. So I would like to see some kind of acknowledgement that the business owner who's moving into my residentially maintained road is willing to pay more for that privilege of crossing onto a road that is maintained by the 30 individuals that live here. The second thing I'd like to address is the special permit and the quality of neighborhood, which seems really ambiguous to me. In the past, an individual purchased 5 parcels of land that did not have access to my private road. At the county hearing, we expressed concern about this individual adding those parcels to our road, and that concern was based on CAL FIRE's description of our road. We are not a category 4 by county standards, and we also did not meet CAL FIRE's road requirements for the number of units on our road. CAL FIRE at that point required a 250-foot turnaround area for fire vehicles, and that did not exist on our road. And CAL FIRE chief indicated that all individuals on our road could lose our homeowners insurance if they discovered that our road did not meet a CAL FIRE description for fire protection for our properties. When I presented this to the Planning Commission, it did not matter, and the 5 additional parcels were granted access to their parcels through our private road. So I want you to understand that, especially as private road residences, there are liabilities to us, especially now as the state of California is experiencing difficulties in homeowners' insurance policies being written and our roads not meeting CAL FIRE's description of what they need to give us protection. Thank you.
Thanks, Judith. Next, we're going to go to Laura Capra.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I just have a couple of things I wanted to say. So we purchased our home quite a while ago. It was a long-term rental. Year and a half ago in 2021, we decided to do as an Airbnb, help supplement our income for retirement. We're both retired now. We use our facility about 3 months, the whole family does, at different times out of the year. For 4 months, approximately, it's an Airbnb because that's the biggest time during the season. We did everything you guys originally asked us to do. We contacted the county. We went through all the proceedings like we're supposed to, getting a business license, making sure the neighbors knew that it was an Airbnb. What you're saying right now is there's a possibility that people are going to lose their right to have an Airbnb when all along we've been doing everything right with you guys. You guys are receiving your tot taxes, everything. So to not allow and consider the people that have already previously done what you have asked us to do and allowed us to have an Airbnb doesn't seem very fair to throw us in the pot with everybody else.
So do you have, are you in Shelter Cove?
No, we are in McKinleyville.
McKinleyville.
So we've not permitted an Airbnb in McKinleyville.
So you haven't, but whenever I apply for a business license, it's shown as a vacation rental. And you guys approved my business license. So you say you don't haven't approved Airbnbs, but you're receiving the tot tax.
So one of the things we've talked about, and I, hate for those of you who have heard me say this before, I apologize for saying it again. Unfortunately, within the world we live in, there are tax laws and there are land use laws. And the tax laws apply whether or not what you're doing is legal from a land use standpoint or not. And that maybe seem unfair, but that is just the reality of it.
So, but the county can take the 12% with no problem, even though it's not, as you guys quote, legal, because you gave me a business license knowing what I was doing. You don't mind taking that 12%, but you're saying.
Yeah, Laura, I don't want to argue, but we're normally pretty particular about not approving a business license for a vacation rental. And if we did that, that was a mistake, but normally we wouldn't. If it's a short-term rental, vacation rental, anything like that, it would not be signed off on by this department because it's not an allowed use. And so the treasurer tax collector would not issue that. There are people I know who have gotten their business licenses for property management purposes. Property management is pretty vague. And the business license has been issued for that purpose. That is far different than a vacation rental.
So you're basically telling me, even though it's a short-term rental, I shouldn't have my license right now. Is that what you're saying?
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that we have not approved you to operate a short-term rental from a land use standpoint.
But
And
I'm not the only one. I know there's,
Laura, I totally understand that. I
yeah,
totally understand that. And I know that's frustrating. It's not the first time I've heard this. I'm sure it won't be the last. And I certainly don't mean to be abrupt or rude or anything like that. But it is really just a difference in the way two different sets of laws are structured.
so you're saying even with what you guys are going through right now, there is not going to be any conditions that I'm going to be able to continue as a short-term reno in McKinleyville?
I didn't say that.
You're not saying that though.
I'm not saying that you won't be able to continue. I don't know what your circumstances are. I'm casting any judgment on that. And in fact, one of the other things that we've said is that we're still looking to try to get a deeper legal understanding of what we can do for short-term rentals that already exist, whether or not there's any legal path forward to acknowledge that.
But that's what I'm asking you to try and find out.
Yeah, we're going to, and I've said that
Yeah.
a few times now.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks, Laura. Gonna go to Karina Wright. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hello, good evening. I just jumped on really quickly. I've missed the other Zoom meetings, and I just very quickly. I own 20 acres just past of Big Lagoon, right off of the 101 on the east side, off of Cane Ridge Road. On those 20 acres, I'd say my neighbors are about 1,200 feet away. And I do have a proper house there, structure. And I just want to know if this is going to affect me, because we were thinking about putting 3 cabins on there for short-term rentals. And so, yeah, I haven't been informed, but I just heard about this, so I'm jumping on and just trying to get some information.
I want to maybe step in real quick, Keenan, and say, I think, Karina, one of the things that is really important for you to define is, are you doing something that you're trying to do like commercial recreation with cabins and rentals, or are you trying to do a short-term rental of a residence? And
It'd be, sorry.
there is a distinction there. Okay.
Okay. We were thinking about doing like those short-term Airbnbs, like 3-4 months out of the year.
Yes. So yes, this would affect you.
Okay. 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 Alrighty. That answers my question. Thank you.
Thanks, Fran. Next, we're going to go to Gage Duran. And I may not be calling on you if you've already spoken. I want to get to everybody who hasn't been able to speak yet. So please be patient with us.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Look at my beautiful picture. In the interest of time and everyone else's comments, I think that I'll just say my unique comments. But I think that the way that you all have handled this and handled this meeting has been really great. And I also appreciate the concerns and interests of many of the people who have short-term rentals and are thinking about it and looking to it for economic reprieve, and feel like that might not be entirely being considered or in the code, allowing perhaps a hardship clause that would allow special needs be met in depressed areas or depressed individual circumstances. Thank you.
Thanks, Gage. If you have some thoughts on what that looks like, would really ask you to send an email to Keenan and I with that information. We're sympathetic to that, and if you got some stuff in mind, please share it. So thanks. Next, going to go to Lisa and Taylor.
Hi, everybody. How's it going? Appreciate the talk tonight. Seems like you guys made some good changes. And my question, I had a couple questions. I'll keep it brief. One was in the coastal zone. At what part in the process does the Coastal Commission come into play? And do they have to have a final sign off on the ordinance before it's adopted?
Great question. And so there are kind of two parts to that. One is that just in terms of getting an ordinance approved for the coastal zone, an ordinance will need to be approved by the Coastal Commission. And so following approval by the Board of Supervisors, the next step for staff is to take the coastal version of the ordinance to the Coastal Commission, and they will have their opportunity to provide feedback on whether it's good as is or changes that they would like to see. And then as far as on a permit by permit basis, and we won't be able to issue permits until we have an ordinance that's been approved by the Coastal Commission in the coastal zone. And then as far as on a permit by permit basis, there are, I suppose that there are just these different areas within the coastal zone where it's local jurisdiction, appeal jurisdiction, and state jurisdiction. Most residences are within either the local or appeal. And what that means is that for local jurisdiction, our office does the permitting. For appeal, it could be appealed to the Coastal Commission, and in the state jurisdiction, they hold jurisdiction.
Okay, so the ordinance is not, we will not be able to get a permit in the coastal zone until the ordinance has been gone across the Coastal Commission's desk and they've approved it.
Correct.
That could take multiple years, correct?
Correct.
Hopefully not years.
Hopefully not.
Okay. In the meantime, we're just kind of status quo.
That is one of the discussions we're struggling with is how to introduce something that would be a placeholder for existing permit holders, and that goes into the whole discussion about grandfathering people.
Okay. My next comment question, I guess, is the difference between a category 4 and a category 3. What is that?
Category 3 can be a little bit narrower. It can be down to like 16 feet.
Is it possible to loosen that restriction to category 3 to make it more open to avoid less special permits, just as a bargaining chip here?
No, thanks for that, Taylor. Let us look at that. We went to category 4 because that is clearly capable of supporting two-way traffic. 16 feet gets a little narrow. So let us just make sure that would comply with fire safe regulations, which is the emergency access is really the issue here.
Yeah, I understand if we could shoot for a category 3 and make sure that there were still hammerheads or turnarounds and the CAL FIRE signed off on it, it might be a nice middle ground.
Yep.
And I guess last question was on parcels with density of more than 1 acre per dwelling unit. So you guys increased that from 10 to 20% and got rid of the as the crow flies. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you for all your time.
Yeah, no, thanks. And one of the important nuances there too for Taylor and everybody else listening is that to make it as simple as possible, it's in reference to what the general plan land use density is. So there's a map that shows that. And so, you may be in a place where the neighborhood has a few different densities in it. And we were struggling with, well, God, how do you interpret that? And so it's just basically go to the map will guide, and that gives the maximum simplicity. So I hope that helps.
Yep, appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks. We're going to go to Ella Holiday.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, hi. I'm sorry. You seem to be freezed. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
We can hear you fine. Yeah.
Okay, great. Hi. So I really appreciate so much the revisions that you've made to the ordinance. And I guess I have a couple of questions. So I really appreciate that you prioritize more the owner occupancy, or at least the hosted occupancy aspects of the ordinance. I think that's fabulous. I'm really concerned about the short-term residences becoming, short-term rental ordinance, the extractive industry of this, of people from outside the area who don't live here, who are buying up properties and who are renting them out and are taking the money out of our county and enriching themselves through the process of these short-term rentals. And so I really appreciate the way that you're restructuring the ordinance to reflect the importance that owner-occupied properties are provided precedence in this process. And so I have a couple of questions related to that still. Is I see that you're still allowing 5 parcels per individual or entity. And I'm wondering what the basis is. So my first question, I have a couple of questions, but my first question is the basis for determining that an individual or operator can have up to 5 parcels. Can you just explain your rationale for that first?
5 is not a magic number. It's a number that was chosen, and it can be more, it can be less, but it really is a placeholder for a policy discussion at the Planning Commission and Board of Supervisors level.
But before that, like, why did you come up with 5? Like, where is that coming from?
I mean, again, I know that this is perhaps not very satisfying, but I would basically echo what the director said. It's like, it's not a magic number. I think that maybe in one of my initial drafts, I wrote 2, and perhaps it was that I talked with a couple operators that, or I guess I took the word operator out. I talked with some folks that were operating more than that, and put in 5, anticipating that it would be something that was discussed and ultimately is a decision that ought to be made at the level of Planning Commission and Board of Supervisors.
Because I understand that, the basis of this ordinance is to help to keep our housing stock from being bought out from outside. And it really seems like I've listened to all the meetings that are available online, and I've attended some, and it just concerns me that this is such an extractive industry. There's so many people from outside the area who have bought up houses already and that are for this purpose. I have people in my this 300-foot, and I appreciate that as someone who just is a hosted short-term rental, that I'm being protected under this revision of the ordinance. But I still have concerns about the affordability of housing in our area besides just my own income. And it really concerns me that I see in my own neighborhood this extractive industry occurring. And I'm just, I'm thinking about the meeting we had in McKinleyville, and Director Ford, I really appreciated that you were thinking about this matrix for when people apply for permits, that there be this matrix for how people are considered in, if it comes down to the 2%, and that there be a way to figure out who should get those permits if there are not enough permits for everyone, instead of it becoming a competitive industry with extractive with people who are outside the area, who are just trying to take as much income as they can out of our area and take it away, that we focus on owner occupied properties instead of just hosted properties, which I really appreciate that you've made that change. But I think we need to focus on owner occupied. So when it comes down to that 2%, are those properties owner occupied, or are they outside our Humboldt County? Are they extractive industries? And that is something that I think, you know, when we look at it, well, maybe when you talked about a matrix, maybe we look at, is it owner occupied first? Is it then operator occupied? Do they have 1 unit? Do they have 2 units? Do they have 3 units? Do they have 4 units? How many, like, instead of just like opening it up to, they can have up to 5 total, maybe it needs to be prioritized that we focus on people who are living here in Humboldt County, who are contributing to the county, who are bringing their income into the county, who are contributing to our county rather than extracting it out and taking it somewhere else. So I guess I would encourage you to look at how we can emphasize that as we finalize the revisions of this.
Okay. Appreciate that, Ella. Thanks for your comments. I'm going to go to Kristen Decker now. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you for letting me have an opportunity to speak. I have a couple comments, so I'm going to they're more suggestions than comments. I'm going to go through them quickly. The first one is the noise ordinance issue. And I would just like to parrot a little bit what was mentioned earlier, that if you're going to add a noise ordinance, I think it be only a matter of fairness that noise ordinance relates to the entire community. That works both ways. There's been just as many times when people coming to visit and vacation have been drowned out by the noises of irresponsible neighbors. So I would just make the request or the suggestion that when that noise ordinance component goes into effect, that it relates to everyone in the community, not just the vacation rental homes. And the second thing I'd like to point out is that there's been a lot of comments about the additional use on roads for vacation rentals versus residential. And it has been our experience that most of the people who are coming into the county as visitors and vacationers typically come home at night and stay at home at night, and they get up early in the morning and they go do all the beautiful sightseeing around the county, or they go visit their kids at Humboldt State. We have a significant portion who are parents of students who need a place to stay, and we really don't have the hotel accommodations in the area to deal with graduation weekend. So I think it needs to be noted that people who live there on a full-time, long-term basis drive in and out just as much as visitors from out of town drive in and out. Most of them come in the morning, like I said, go out in the morning, come in at night when their visiting day is over. So I think that needs to be balanced. And then the third thing is there's a lot of discussion of who should get the permits and what priority it should be in. And I think that the county should really look at, as they go through this process of doling out, which people get that 2% of permits and which ones don't. My personal thought is to do something similar to what the city of Trinidad did, which is people who are operating now get a permit, but it does not transfer. They cannot pass on that benefit. I think it's important to note that anyone who has bought a house or built a house or an ADU unit has put a significant amount of financial resources into putting themselves in that position on the hopes that they might have some kind of retirement income, or just even dissuade the cost of owning that place or hopefully retiring to Humboldt County in the future. A lot of people buy these homes and they rent them out just to cover the costs, if it even covers the costs of holding the real estate, in the hopes that they'll have some place to retire as they age. And it for the woman who was speaking about how these vacation rental homes suck the money out of the county, I would just say that the margins on these VRBOs and these Airbnbs are so small that I would venture to guess if less than 10% of the money, if it's even a positive number, actually leaves the county, and 90% of the money that comes into the county goes to the management companies and the linen companies and the house cleaners and all the people who are employed by these VRBOs. And I just think it needs to be said that there's a whole industry of jobs that are created within Humboldt County from these VRBOs, whether it be people who are managing their own property and living on the income, or people who are hiring locals to do that work for them. It is not a small economic impact by closing down homes that bring tourists to an area that's just surviving on tourism. And then the last thing I think should be considered is that if you don't choose to allow to keep people grandfathered in who have been operating responsibly and supporting the community, then the county, I think, should look at a one-time reevaluation to property taxes of the people who are not getting a license, because they clearly would have paid a purchase price that was contingent on their expectation of being able to earn money off of that property, and the purchase price of that house, if it was an existing VRBO or Airbnb, would have been elevated based on the income stream that that property was getting. And the value of that property is not going down by market forces, which is usually what's driving the county's property taxes, but it's being driven down by the county taking the rights of these people away. And I know you say that the county has never permitted people to do that, but I think that the county has definitely set a precedence by not enforcing any of these rules for decades and allowing people, as one of your other callers said, allowing people to do it, issuing business licenses, turning the cheek and not enforcing the rule that it's not allowable. So there's a long-term legal precedence. And I think while I personally support grandfathering in the people who have built financial investments into the county, if you don't do that, I think you really need to, on a fairness protocol, address what the decrease in the property value of those homes that have had that income stream taken away does to the owners of the property. And then I'd just like to ask, I know each time the draft has come out, on my personal opinion, I'm no attorney. So as I read through these drafts, I feel like significant changes have been made with each one. And I'm wondering what the expected timeline is on passing the ordinance. And if you could speak a little bit to what the notice requirements are. I know the county has notice requirements for public comment. And each time one of these drafts comes out, I feel like we're dealing with a slightly different set of rules. Are you resetting the clock on the notice requirements because of these significant changes? What does the timeline look like going forward?
Okay, thanks, Chris. I'll deal with that last one. That is a legitimate question for everybody to understand. On what we're doing now, there are no timeline requirements. This is just really a matter of public engagement. Once we get into the public hearing process, which will be at the earliest October 5th, then we will make sure that those are out. Well, the staff report and the ordinance will go out at least a week ahead of time. So it'll go out the Friday before the 5th, whatever day that is, October. I don't know. But There'll also be notices in the paper at that point identifying that the county's considering that. And so right now, these are not noticed discussions or notice release of drafts. That won't happen until we get into the public hearing with the Planning Commission. And as I said, that the earliest that will occur is October 5th. Hope that helps a little bit. Thanks for your comments. Going to go now to Jessica Rockenbach.
Hi there. Thanks so much for your time. I have an existing Airbnb, and we created it when I was diagnosed with cancer last year. I started undergoing surgeries in January and went through 3 until now. And we've been renting it out. I can't stress enough how important I think it is that existing Airbnbs get grandfathered in some way. There's just such a considerable investment that goes into setting up a property, and I think that that really shouldn't be slighted. I think that, you know, in the cannabis ordinance, it was pretty simple. If something was in existence before the start date of the ordinance, then it was considered existing. I think that it could be that simple in this one as well, especially if somebody has paid the TOT tax. It seems like there's a pretty clear record of if they've done business or not. So I would hope that that would be considered. I also wanted to echo what people have been saying about road standards being a little bit strict. There's just a lot of slim roads in this county, and I think that one provision is going to put a lot of people into the special permit category. In the cannabis permits, I know that there was road standards in there that Cal Fire signed off on as emergency standards. It seems like those might be able to be looked at to see if, you know, there's some wiggle room on the width of the road, or how many pull-offs you see within however many feet, that sort of thing. Also, it seems like the cap, you know, should be set to a number that's above pre-existing. I don't think that you guys want to shrink the market as it currently is. I've heard a lot of people say recently that have multiple Airbnb properties, as I've been talking to them more and more through this process and at the meetings. It seems like a lot of them echo the sentiment that the market has reached a saturated point, and like people have started converting kind of naturally. So setting something more aggressive might not really be necessary. It might just want to let the market level out and leave a little bit of room for growth, as, you know, building here is complicated and difficult and expensive. So housing stock might not rise as quickly as the demand for more hotels, especially because we've had a lot of hotels go out of business. You know, my family's from out of state. We've always had a hard time finding places for them to stay. And this last year, when one of us had COVID, you know, the other one wanted to quarantine away from the house. It was impossible to find an Airbnb unit. It was the middle of July. There wasn't a single one available in the county. I had to get a hotel room for $400 a night for 7 nights. And it was, sorry, it was just like, it seemed astronomically expensive, and like we should have more stock available. So I just wanted to say, I think that the market should be able to play itself out a little bit more freely than just putting that cap on. And I wanted to also say that I don't see us as extractors. You know, we contribute taxes to the county. We are economic generators. I don't see us as extractive in any way. And I want to keep my house. I don't want to lose it. You know, we're saying incentivize people selling their homes, like we're not saying we're incentivizing people losing their homes. I don't think that's right.
Thanks, Jessica. Appreciate the comments. The last hand up is Diane Desmartz. I know you've already spoken, but go ahead and unmute yourself. And
I thought I had taken my hand down.
But I do want to say that people who've lived in a neighborhood for a long time and built up their neighborhood and created a safe community and a road, we should have just as many rights as people who want to come in and establish a business. It has to be equalized somehow.
Thanks, Diane. A. Preston, I see your hand just went up. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
You for interesting.
You're breaking up a little bit, having trouble hearing you.
I'm on hosting, the host in this case is a part of.
Yeah, we can't really understand what you're saying, unfortunately. I'll at the end, I'm gonna put up my email address. Feel free to send me an email with any questions or comments.
Appreciate it.
Okay, thanks. I see Samantha Wilson. I don't think you've talked before. I'm not going to revisit with anybody that's already talked. So go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you, John. I did speak, but I just had one short question with regard to COVID. Will there be something in the ordinance that touches upon quality standards for housekeeping? As a former housekeeper trained by Vacasa and private entities, I think that that is paramount for running a short-term rental, that there needs to be something touched upon as far as proper training of the people who are staffed, whether it is the owner themselves who's cleaning, or if they have a contractor or subcontractor for all the touch services, and what the protocols would be put into place should someone contract COVID, and what procedures would need to be implemented in order for the property to be thoroughly cleaned, and any cancellations that would need to take place on the host side. So I think there should be a caveat there. Thank you.
Thanks, Samantha. Okay, that brings us to the end of those who have had their hands up. And I want to thank you all for participating tonight and for being patient. I'm sorry we have gone way over time. But I think the comments were good and are helpful, and we have some more work to do. And we will be working on this for the Planning Commission hearing on the 21st.
Working on a workshop, just
Or
to be clear.
workshop. Thank you, Keenan.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I'm going to put up my contact information in case anyone wants it here as we close. So, yeah, I'm the assigned planner for it. There's my email. There's my phone number. Please feel free to send me a message or give me a call.